Park Hun, a water delivery person, walks past a playground. A female notices a coin laying underneath, and the boy pushes it beneath his foot. The girl adds, "If it's heads, it's yours. If it's tails, it's mine." When the boy looked at it, it was heads. But the youngster didn't realize it was the head. The girl takes up the coin. The kid tries to take the currency from her. Suddenly, he notices her damaged finger. Even though the girl is ignorant of the damage, Hun promptly recognizes the fracture. Taking action, he takes a child's ice cream, consumes it, and uses the stick as an improvised plaster cast. He attaches the stick with the girl's hair tie to support her damaged finger. Hun requests his compensation following therapy, but the girl points out that she never asked for his aid. Amid this, the girl's father appears and takes her away. The father takes his daughter, Young Guys, to the hospital, where the doctor informs him that her finger is really fractured and that whomever tried the improvised cast did an excellent job. The doctor then instructs a nurse to accompany the patient to an X-ray. However, the nurse directs the father and daughter to follow a blue line on the floor to the X-ray room. While trying to find the radiology department, they suddenly run across Hun, who is there to carry water containers. As Hun attempts to help them, he observes the father's chest trouble. Hun, concerned, lays his palm on the man's chest and inquires as to if he has difficulty breathing when sleeping. The father, however, ignores it, maintaining that he is okay. Despite the father's assertions of good health, his evident distress implies otherwise. Before he can be treated, all of the physicians are rushed to the emergency department due to a bus truck crash that has left 15 people critically injured. While the medical team cares for the accident victims, the young man's father begins to lose consciousness. Concerned for her father, the young man seeks a nurse for help. Unfortunately, amidst the turmoil, no one takes her seriously, making it impossible for her to gain the care her father so requires. Frustrated and thirsty for attention, a young man lets out a scream, briefly capturing everyone's attention. However, the physicians are preoccupied with other patients. Amidst this, a doctor named Suan approaches Young Guys and inquires about her requirements. Suan begins to examine her father after learning of his condition. Unfortunately, another emergency demands Suan's attention, so she directs Dr. Kim to take the young man's father for a chest X-ray and blood testing. Hun, concerned about the girl and her father, decides to join them to the elevator. The young man's father loses consciousness and falls. Han and the doctor swiftly placed him on the floor for emergency treatment. Suspecting pneumonia, Dr. Kim rushes to assemble the appropriate intubation equipment to stabilize the patient's condition. Hun lays his hand on the man's chest and quickly recognizes that he is having a heart arrest. At that point, Dr. Kim comes and begins placing a tube into the patient's mouth to aid breathing. Hun, on the other hand, insists that the patient has a myocardial infarction and is in cardiac failure. Dr. Kim is first dubious and hesitates until Hun instructs him to follow his instruction. Dr. Kim listens to the patient's heartbeat at Hun's urging and discovers that it is a cardiac arrest. Dr. Kim starts CPR as a nurse retrieves the defibrillator. Hun takes leadership and uses the device to apply an electric shock to the heart, attempting to reestablish a regular beating. Soon, the patient's heart starts pounding again. He is promptly escorted to the operating theater and readied for surgery. But the physicians are so busy with the accident victims that they don't have time for it. Dr. Kim badly needs a surgeon, but no one is available. Young Men's eyes welled up with tears as they witnessed this. She encourages Hun to operate on her father. Hun, on the other hand, refuses to risk losing his license. As he prepares to depart, the daughter removes a penny from her purse and hands it to Hun as payment for the procedure, pleading him to spare her father's life. When Hun sees sad Young Guys, he resolves to aid her. He enters the operation theater, taking precautions. The other physicians soon recognize him as an outsider, but Hun remains determined as he begins the procedure. The physicians are astounded by his exact incisions. The other physicians soon recognize him as an outsider, but Hun remains determined as he begins the procedure. The physicians are astounded by his exact incisions, which strangely do not cause any blood. Meanwhile, Dr. Man of the hospital monitors the procedure from above. Seeing Hun's abilities, he asks Dr. Kim why the patient did not bleed, to which Dr. Kim replied that he has no idea. Surprisingly, our usual water delivery guy happened to be one of North Korea's best heart surgeons. Despite his plain look, Hun has exceptional medical abilities. The unusual incidents occurred when he was doing a surgery in North Korea, and the electricity went off. He did, however, finish the procedure with expertise, sparing the patient's life. Despite his remarkable ability, fate took an unexpected turn and led him to South Korea. Hun is still doing surgery on the fathers of Young Guys nowadays. Suan soon enters the operation theater and identifies him as an outsider. She requests that he halt the process, but Hun says he would only stop if she is willing to take over. Other physicians support him because of his exceptional abilities. The lady doctor advises to Suin that they interrogate the stranger after saving the patient's life. Suin is furious and demands security. However, before they can guide them in, Hun has already vanished, having finished the mission sooner than expected. Suin searches for Hun and ultimately finds him while accompanied by security. She slaps Hun's face and accuses him of carrying out an unlawful activity. Hun responds, stating that she is not one to cast judgment because she abandoned a patient in need. Suin attempts another slap, but Hun stops her, prompting her to attack him with her other hand. In the midst of this, Suin receives a call from Dr. Kim informing her that the patient is in serious condition and exhibiting indications of polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Faced by this news, Suin considers alerting the police, but Han proposes giving the patient 20 milliliters of magnesium to stabilize his condition, demonstrating his surgical expertise. Meanwhile, Jae, another senior and talented doctor in the hospital, attends to the father of the young men. Jae saw the serious state. Jun tells his staff to deliver 20 milliliters of magnesium. Miraculously, the patient stabilizes, leaving Suin shocked, as Hun had previously advised the same magnesium therapy. Even though Suin recognizes Hun's ability, she persists on having him jailed for performing an unlawful procedure. Jae-jun intervenes, emphasizing the need of obtaining authorization before operating in a hospital with which they are not linked. Since the patient's life has been saved, Jae-jun releases Hun on the condition that he never returns to the hospital. Dr. Man cries out to Hun as he leaves. Hun, however, flees the hospital after suspecting Dr. Man of attempting to punish him for his actions. He's escaping from Dr. Man because he doesn't want to lose his license. Even though he does not work in a large hospital, he is paid 3 times as much as a typical doctor. Because his patients are gangsters and are sought, their minions are unable to transport them to a suitable hospital. One day, a patient presented with appendicitis. Hun began the procedure and asked a large charge. However, when the henchmen attempted to assault him rather than pay, he showed them their boss's unstitched wound, which would remain open until they paid. Now the guys had to pay Hun. Hun refused the card payment and demanded that they pay him in cash. When the henchmen tried to pay him half, Hun once again inflicted pain on the boss, eventually receiving the entire sum. Returning to the current day, Dr. Man attempts to contact Hun, but his efforts are futile as Hun successfully flees in his truck. Man follows him to his clinic and persuades him to join the hospital staff. Hun first hesitates, but changes his mind when he sees a $50,000 down payment. Hun's desire for such a large sum of money dates back to his time as a heart surgeon in a military hospital. One day, he was told to rescue a guy by giving him a new kidney, and the donor was the man's daughter. Hun was completely taken aback when he noticed a crimson band on the girl's wrist. It was the identical bracelet he had given to his childhood friend Jae. When he revealed the woman's face, he discovered that the girl was his buddy, who had gone missing after being taken by the North Korean authorities. Hun spared the guy's daughter rather than the man himself. He fled the region with Jae in his arms, hoping to obtain sanctuary. However, his scheme failed when the authorities turned against him, siding with the North Koreans who had previously ruined his life. In a stunning change of events while avoiding the North Koreans, he was trapped. Jae sacrificed herself by taking a bullet intended for Hun, and she ends herself hanging from the balcony. Hun was shot for making commotion while attempting to save her. He was apprehended by South Korean authorities, preventing his capture by North Koreans. However, a few days later, he received surprising news. Jae was alive and had been returned to North Korea. Hun, driven by a strong desire to reunite with his love, sought the aid of Mr. Lim, a guy recognized for rescuing people from North Korea. Mr. Lim informed Hun that he had found Jae in a North Korean camp and had even supplied a video as evidence. However, the rescue came at a high cost of $50,000. Hun was struggling financially until he met Dr. Man. He was able to complete the arrangement that would allow him to ensure Jae's rescue. However, things took an unexpected turn when Hun's buddy Changi told him she had seen Jae in the hospital. Hun immediately went to the hospital with Dr. Man and discovered Jae. However, he was unable to find her. Hun, furious with Mr. Lim for lying to him, grabbed his collar and demanded information concerning Jae's location, claiming to have seen her in the hospital. Mr. Lim stated that he may have seen someone else since if she was present, she should have notified him. Hun eventually calmed down after hearing Mr. Lim's remarks and fled the store. As he walked away, an unknown person tossed money at Mr. Lim, showing that all orders concerning Hun and Jae were coordinated by this mystery character. Hun received $50,000 in checks after agreeing to engage with Dr. Man. He quickly delivered the money to Mr. Lim. However, a shocking twist occurred when Hun tore all the checks in half, delivering just one share to Mr. Lim. He said that the remaining halves will be distributed after the assignment was accomplished. With these statements, Hun exited the store, leaving Mr. Lim obviously angry. Hun was eventually recruited by the hospital, but he and Suin remained at odds, with him dismissing her as a quack and her seeing him as someone who flouted the law. One day, a patient's health dramatically deteriorated, and the physicians felt powerless. She had signed a DNR paperwork, thus they were unable to undertake life-saving treatments such as CPR. Hun, on the other hand, could not take the thought of watching her die. He urgently utilized electric shocks and CPR to resuscitate her. During the process, Hun saw a familiar bracelet on her wrist, the same one he gave Jay. He phoned the hospital where she was moved, hoping to find out how she acquired it, but they had no idea. Meanwhile, Suin was enraged after learning about Hun's deeds. Unlike Suin, Hun was keen to keep the patient alive so that he could interview her about the ban. He began intensive preparation for the major tumor removal procedure. Suin, on the other hand, stood in close proximity to the sufferer. It was discovered that the woman was her mother, who abandoned her when she was a youngster. Suin begged to stay with her mother, but the lady reprimanded her and told her to stay with her affluent father. Suin has never understood why her mother abandoned her. She did not want her to suffer any longer, thus she was furious at Hun's conduct. However, when her mother regained consciousness for a brief time and clutched her hand, Suin resolved to do everything it took to preserve her life. She contacted her lover, Jae-jun, and begged him to save her mother's life. However, Jae-jun was unable to assist her since he had been advised by the patient's guardian, Aka Suin's father, not to do the operation, because there was only a 5% chance of success, and they couldn't perform such a procedure if they were certain the patient would die. Suin, desperate to be with her mother again, approached Hun, handed him the coin as payment, and urged him to do her mother's surgery. Hun was affected by her request and promised to help. The patient was carried into the operating room, and Hun quickly joined the surgical team. Dr. Oh, Su-Yan's father and hospital owner, instructs Hun not to carry out the procedure, disregarding Dr. Oh's instructions. Hun says that he has approval from the patient's guardian, Suin. The procedure begins, and Suin's lover, Jae-jun, meets Dr. Oh outside the operating room. Everything goes well at first, until the patient's health deteriorates and he develops heart failure while having his tumor removed. She sadly dies. Suin is hesitant to accept her mother's death, even after the procedure has ended. Distraught, she begins functioning alone, rejecting Hun's attempts to intercede. Suin is consumed by her sadness, unable to confront the terrible reality. Hun stands at her side, comforting and supporting her throughout this difficult time. Jae-jun is upset after seeing Suin embrace Hun. The next day, a meeting is scheduled to address Hun's behavior during Suin's mother's surgery. Jae-jun uses the opportunity to attack Hun, reminding out that the procedure was performed despite the patient's dismal chances of life. Hun admits his error and apologizes to Suin. Suin encourages everyone to move ahead while acknowledging that the surgeon tried his best. However, Jae-jun refuses to let the issue go. He accuses Hun of carrying out the operation simply for financial benefit. Surprisingly, rather than denying the claim, Hun confesses to it. It appears that he decides not to mention Su-Yan's frantic need for surgery. Hun tells Jae-jun to drop the subject. As Hun is ready to depart, Jae-jun stops him. This time, Hun responds by accusing Jae-jun of picking patients based on their prospects of survival. Jae-jun, knowing of his blunder, keeps mute and does not answer. After everyone has left, Suin speaks with Jae-jun, informing him that he may be venting his aggravation on Hun since he is unable to operate on her mother. Jae-jun is unhappy to hear Suin siding with Hun. Suin later visits her mother's house, only to discover that it is locked. She soon meets Jae-chi, who happens to be her mother's previous doctor. Jae-chi introduces herself as Sony and opens the door, allowing Suin into her mother's house. Inside, she exposes a series of pictures of significant incidents in Suin's life, implying that her mother had been watching her all along. Jae-chi reveals that Suin's mother thought she'd be happy with her affluent father. She was afraid Suin would resent her if she didn't give her to him. Suin breaks down when she sees her mother's face instead of Jae's. Jae offers solace during this sensitive time. On the other hand, Hun receives a call from Mr. Lim, who informs him that he has found Jae-chi. She informs Hun to meet near his clinic with the remaining checks. However, before Hun can continue his conversation with Mr. Lim, a mystery figure comes from behind. He fires a truck, forcing it to crash into Mr. Lim's automobile. That man turns out to be Gino, a North Korean officer. Hun was able to escape while under his supervision. His bosses accused him of treason, severed his finger, and booted him out of the group as retribution for losing Hun. Now he intends to get revenge on Hun, but he and Jae-chi are working on another task. Back in the present, Mr. Lim is seriously injured and requires immediate surgery. Hun takes him to his clinic and prepares for surgery. Dr. Man comes and tries to stop Hun, telling him to wait for the ambulance. Hun, reluctant to wait, goes forward with the procedure. During the procedure, he realizes that a rib bone has broken and penetrated Lim's heart. Despite the limited illumination, Hun expertly conducts the operation, effectively extracting the bone from the ventricle and sewing the incision. Dr. Man is astounded by Hun's ability to work under such hard settings with limited illumination and equipment. The ambulance comes shortly thereafter, and Mr. Lim is taken to the hospital for additional treatment. However, after some time, Hun is unable to locate Lim at the hospital. He inquires with the receptionist, but no one appears to know his location. Just thereafter, Hun receives a message from Lim's phone number claiming that he is on his way to China and will not be in touch again. When Hun phones Lim, his calls go unanswered because the phone is now in Gino's control. Gino is shown to have organized Lim's disappearance from the hospital. If Lim had revealed Jaehee's whereabouts to Hun, Gino's scheme would have failed. Hun then realizes that Chang had mentioned seeing Jae-chi in the corridor. Knowing that the institution has surveillance cameras, he chooses to watch the film to confirm Jaehee's presence. Hun tries to go inside the security room, but the guards force him out after learning about his girlfriend from Chang. Suin decides to provide a hand. They visit the surveillance room at night and zoom in on Jae's face, but the image is too indistinct to identify her. However, upon seeing the child in the film, Suin recalls seeing her on a visit to her mother's house. Suin goes with Hun to his apartment to have a better look at Jae, and they view a video of Jae in the camp. Suin instantly knows her as the woman who treated her mother. Eager to discover more, the trio visits the hospital where Suin's mother was treated. They ask about a woman named Jae-chi but discover nothing. As they stand outside the hospital, Jae-chi approaches them. Hun's eyes well up with tears as he struggles to accept that Jae-chi is standing directly in front of him. Hun presents the ring to her and asks if she recognizes him. However, Jae-chi fails to acknowledge him, claiming that she fashioned the ring for her patient. Despite Hun's efforts to awaken her memory, Jae-chi displays no symptoms of remembering. Tired by Hun's continuous probing, she tells him to leave her alone. Hun pursues Jae-chi inside the hospital as Suin tries to stop him. Hun pulls Jae's arm, attempting to elicit memories while pretending she wants to check on a patient. Jae-chi excuses herself, leaving Hun disappointed. Suin remains at his side, offering comfort. She then shows him Jaehee's social media page, pointing out that, unlike his genuine lover, this Jae-chi does not smile much. Hun is taken aback when he sees a photo of Jae-chi with her putative parents and realizes they are not the parents he remembers. Hun, distraught by the circumstances, turns to Booz, telling Suin that he will cling on to Jae-chi no matter what. Suin, feeling envious, reminds out that Jae-chi is someone who is always thinking about her and really loves her. Hun responds by questioning whether Jae-jun loves Suin in the same way he loves Jae-chi. Suin counters by asking whether anybody loves her as much as Hun loves Jae-chi. Suin softly strokes Hun's face as he begins to lose consciousness, expressing her concern for him and potentially hinting at deeper affections. Jae-jun contacts Suin to check about her location after noticing her worry about Hun. Suin, aware of Jae-jun's disdain for Hun, decides to lie to him. After witnessing the two hugging, Jae-jun gets increasingly skeptical of their friendship. Jae-hee comes after getting a call from Suin, but Hun has already seen her in a dream and has fallen asleep. Suin decides to take Hun to her mother's house while he is still asleep. As she lowers him on the bed, Hun, still semi-conscious, reaches out and embraces her as if she were Jae-chi. Suin's affections for Hun get more intense at this point, straining their emotional dynamics even more. Jae-chi feels envious of Suin and Hun's closeness and confronts Suin about their relationship. Suin clarifies the confusion and reveals the similarities between Jae-chi and Hun's girlfriend, assisting Jae-chi in understanding the cause for Hun's unusual conduct. The next day, Jae-jun approaches Hun and tells him to keep away from Suin. When Hun refers to her as the quack, Jae-jun loses his cool, grabbing him by the collar and ordering him not to speak about Suin in such terms. As the conflict heats up, Suin enters, causing Jae-jun to release Hun and apologize for his actions. Dr. M finds Hun's situation and inquires whether Jae-hee resembles his fiancée. Hun says that she is his lover, not merely a doppelganger. Hun demands that her medical records be retrieved by another doctor in order to establish her identification. Because both of her kidneys were damaged and she had a kidney transplant, she should now only have one kidney. Initially, the security staff refused to assist. Hun takes matters into his own hands, grabbing the ultrasound CD and playing it on his laptop. The ultrasound reveals 2 kidneys, confirming that Jae-chi is not Hun's girlfriend. Despite discovering the truth, Hun grins at Jae-chi and recalls their previous interactions. He used to hold Jae-chi and tell her they had the same heartbeat. Despite realizing she is not Jae-chi, Hun approaches her and seeks to embrace her to hear her heartbeat. However, Jae-chi pushes him away and urges him to be professional. When Suin asks Hun about his activity, he jokingly states that only 2 individuals in the world have the same heartbeat and are meant for one another. As a joke, he hugs Suin, implying that she is his fate. Suin, who already has affections for him, becomes outraged by this joke and smacks him.